Hello and welcome. I'm Randy Bueller, joined by Luis Scott Vargas. Figured we'd come on and chat for a few minutes before the show starts. Still got the matches queued up at 7, just like we've scheduled, but we were ready, so figured we'd turn on the stream, see if you guys want to chat about anything.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan. I'm doing pretty well. I've been contemplating my matchup. I haven't gone so far as to test it because there's a pro tour in a week, and I've been testing those games instead. But
Sure.
I played a lot against decks like the Delver deck Steve's playing. Obviously, he's, metagamed his to what he expected, and I think his deck is actually pretty good against my deck.
Okay.
But I've got a lot of removal in my deck, which I think is pretty good. Like having Toxic Deluge, Fire Ice, double Lightning Bolt, and a bunch of Snapcasters means that I have a decent chance of killing all his guys. And if I can keep threats off the board, then my deck does have a better game going long. I mean, eventually I'll draw Yawgmoth's Will, and hopefully it resolves.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely one of the most interesting matches we've got set up today. We've got kind of the battle at the top of the standings with you and Steve, and then the battle at the bottom of the standings with Bob and Josh.
Yeah, and both matches are actually pretty relevant to people looking at the top 4 or people looking at not coming in last. I mean, both those are definitely the two sides of the equation here. And people might look at like a 2-3 or 3-2 record and be like, that's not very good. Because in a normal tournament, obviously you're out of contention. But in a 10-person league that's cutting to top 4, you have to make the top 40%. People are going to make it with like the fourth and maybe even third place could have pretty bad records.
It could be 5-4.
Yeah, especially if Steve beats me and then goes on to beat everyone else. I mean, if Steve beats me, he's basically a lock, I think, or is maybe an actual lock.
Yeah, I haven't done the math. He's certainly a virtual lock if it's not mathematical, but it might actually be mathematically locked.
Right. At which point, everyone who is not currently playing him wants him to win all those rounds.
Right. We start rooting for him. Absolutely.
Yeah, we saw the same thing happen with Shouta at the Players Championship back in 2011, where he went on like a 11-1 run in the Swiss. And everyone who hadn't played him was like, man, I hope Shouta just beats everyone. So,
yeah, it could be. I mean, 5-4 is sort of realistic for fourth place, right? I mean, maybe it takes 6-3, but I mean, I would certainly think 6-3. You're making the playoffs. It's a top 4 cut,
right?
And the thing is, all you have to do is be tied for fourth to make the playoffs. We'll just add more playoff rounds in order to.
You don't have to play extra rounds, so I could see that. But yeah, I mean, I think that. Making the cut is not that hard, but then you still have a lot of tournament left afterwards.
Well, yeah, I mean, not that hard. It's also a tough field, but I do feel like there's.
Well,
I mean, even
by record.
I still feel like even at 2-3, I'm still very much in the thick of it. I mean, I kind of need to win this round. 2-4 would sting, but 3-3, whatever. I just need to go probably 2-1 with my last deck.
Well, that's the other thing is, I mean, I'm sure we all pretty much feel the same way where. Well, you don't want to lose because you don't want to lose playing vintage, on camera. Like, it's not actually just. I mean, the prizes are not what's motivating us to play this league. We want to play this league because we want to play awesome matches of vintage. So, and part of the awesome matches of vintage is you want to win sweet games.
All true, definitely true. Yeah,
so go ahead. I was going to say, one of the things I actually wanted to bring up is we were talking on Twitter a little earlier this week. The vintage daily events actually haven't been firing recently. And I think, this is as good a time as any to encourage people to play in them. Like, I certainly have gotten in the habit of like letting people know ahead of time just because maybe that gets one extra person or 2 extra people in the vintage queue. But the daily events are so much fun that, yeah, I would kind of hope that they would start firing again, and I know that Worth and Turian are aware of it. Like Worth was actually asking, what are good suggestions for prizes that we don't currently do that we could potentially do that don't even exist yet, and he got a lot of good responses.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's a problem that's not unique to the vintage constructed queues. I think constructed on Magic Online, there's this tricky relationship where the obvious thing to give away as prizes is booster packs, but the value of those booster packs is really a function of all of the drafting that goes on. And I mean, when you win packs, normally you just want to run back the draft. So the packs have, they are the majority of the entry value. But like converting your packs into the ability to keep playing constructed, it's just the loop doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I think would be cool, and I actually forgot to mention this to Worth, but I will, is if you rotate constructed packs more frequently. Because when all the daily events are giving away like the same pack for months, that does tend to impact how easy it is to join more events based on those packs. So I think rotating the packs given away could be one thing. I mean, there's a lot of creative solutions, and it would be awesome if they worked such that people wanted to play more vintage. I think that is all part of it.
Yeah, and I think that for the dailies, the mean, the prize schedules for the dailies are good enough that really feel like that's really just a critical mass problem. But if people knew, oh, this is the one that everybody's going to make an effort to show up for, I'll make an effort to show up for it also. So I mean, actually think you picking on Twitter, trying to find pick times and rallying the troops to actually fire one is actually a perfectly reasonable strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I tried tagging a bunch of people who I knew couldn't, who might be interested in playing Vintage. Most of them
sucked me in successfully. I don't know if I was the only one, but I saw a couple people.
Your round in the 8-player event that we joined was over really quickly.
Yeah, that was.
The only reason I know that is because I won my round in like what felt like 6 minutes, and you were already done. But I won't ask what you're playing because you might be testing out your next deck. So.
No, I was running my current deck. I was running the.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense then.
Yeah, those games do not take a lot of turns, and they usually don't take a lot of time either.
I kept a really sketchy hand with stacks on the draw against what I thought was combo because all he played game 1 was City of Brass before conceding.
Okay.
And he had the turn 1 kill, but I had a Mindbreak Trap, which is why I kept this terrible hand, and he just conceded to it.
Oh wow!
It was pretty great.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not convinced the Burning Oath deck is good enough. I mean, between Grafdigger's Cage and Mental Misstep, there's too many super powerful answers floating around in too many deck lists right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of new barriers to entry for combo because I think, but if you look back to before Mental Misstep was a thing, combo was good, but it wasn't dominant. It was just one of the good decks.
Right.
And now Mental Misstep has made the control and tempo decks so much better. And combo hasn't really gotten anything new, right? I can't think of a single new card. And Flusterstorm got printed. Not that Flusterstorm is nearly as big of a deal as people think, because
honestly, you can usually duress them before you can't sit on the Flusterstorm. The dream is that you hit all the copies of Tendrils, but you're always getting duressed before that happens.
Right. So Flusterstorm's not a big deal, but it's just another 1-mana counterspell that they didn't have access to before. Take out Mana Drain and Spell Pierce and put in Flusterstorm, and you are better against those decks. So combo hasn't gotten any new boosts, but it might now. Now with Khans of Tarkir, which we're going to have in our last deck for the Vintage League, we've got Treasure Hunt and Dig Through Time, or Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. Both those are cards.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, maybe even Jeskai Ascendancy. Like, I haven't actually goldfished a Jeskai Ascendancy deck, but I can hear the buzz coming from social media. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I think that Jeskai Ascendancy is actually
more of a modern legacy thing.
A very broken card, but yes, I don't think it's gonna do a ton in Vintage, is my guess, because needing a small green creature to survive and to play this really awkwardly costed enchantment is probably not as good as just playing Moxes and Dark Rituals if that's what you want to do.
But you draw 3 cards is a good effect in Vintage.
Right, 1-mana draw 3 that can't be Mental Misstepped or misdirected is actually pretty good, and I could see a deck with Dark Rituals, maybe even Thoughtscour. I mean, Josh Underlane's already playing Thoughtscour in this tournament, so. Wow. He's ready for the Treasure Cruise.
You're going to suck me into this combo shenanigans again, aren't you?
Well, the problem with that is, since this is completely new, I don't think anyone's going to be brave enough to play it without actually testing. And given that the Pro Tour ends and then 2 days later we have to turn in our deck list, I suspect I will not have a dedicated Treasure Cruise deck. I'm not saying I won't play Treasure Cruise in whatever deck I end up playing, if I happen to somehow play a blue deck. But I do think that building a whole new deck is going to be tough given the time horizons I'm working with.
How many of the 10 competitors are in the Pro Tour? I mean, I'm going, but commentating, so I can maybe sneak into time to test a thing or two.
It's looking to me like 6 of the 10 people are going to be there, including you.
Okay.
So I think that we've got Chris Pakula, Rich Shea. I do not believe Bob's going. I mean, we tested with him last time, and he said that he wasn't going to be able to make it this time. And then Steve are the people who are not currently attending the Pro Tour.
But Williams is going. He was the other guy that I wasn't sure about.
I hope he is. He's staying in our house.
There you go.
So, and yeah. So that's a good chunk of people. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to play 0 games of Vintage while I'm in Hawaii, but I really shouldn't play a lot given that Cons is a pretty deep set for Standard.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, Delve it's going to be interesting to see how Delve plays out because it's very clearly dangerous in the older formats. Dangerous in a good way because it's exciting and you got to push the envelope somewhere. But it is interesting that the finals of the Star City Games Open last week, had 4 Treasure Cruise in the first place deck, and 4 Monastery Swiftspear as well. So I mean that's a pretty big game. And there's also multiple Treasure Cruise Sultai Delver decks in the top 8 as well.
Yeah, no, I actually randomly had lunch with Eric Lauer today, and it was talking to him about it a little bit. And it's like Treasure Crew 4 other than Legacy. Is this really what was supposed to happen? And I mean, he kind of shrugged. It was like they don't spend a ton of time testing Legacy. It's the kind of thing where like they knew the cards would be better in older formats. So they're like, maybe it seems like a fine thing if that is in fact how it plays out, and that seems to be how it's played out.
Yeah, I think that you can't really expect R&D to spend a ton of time on internal formats because they're so big and so difficult to test that you kind of hope they shake themselves out. And honestly, like bans in older formats are not the end of the world. Like they've happened before. They will happen again.
I agree.
I do think it's awesome when you can print cards that are good but not necessarily broken in standard, or even just don't do anything in standard, but are awesome in older formats. And I think like Deathrite Shaman, artifacts to get cast off Mitchell's Workshop, Delve cards are a good example of cards that, some are clearly good in standard, but they're not breaking standard, but can potentially break or at least push the envelope on older formats.
Yeah, Treasure Cruise seems to me like it fits that really well. I don't know. I don't expect you to talk about how good you think it is in standard, but it certainly looks to me like a card that's going to be a lot better in Legacy.
I agree. I mean, I obviously I have been playing standard, but I don't think it's giving away huge secrets to say that all the Delve cards are at least worth trying. I mean, people have been playing them, so. The finals of the Mana Deprived Modern Tournament, I've been looking at all these lists because I've been writing about Delve for actually Wizards Magic. My article is going up later this week. And
nice.
The finals was a Jeskai Ascendancy deck with 4 Treasure Crews or 3 Treasure Crews versus a blue-red-white control deck with multiple dig through time. So, things are making waves already. And this is just the beginning. This is before people have had a chance to try out all the like craziness or try a bunch of different things. Like, we've seen Treasure Crews kind of sneak into some of the decks in Legacy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it creates whole new archetypes by itself.
Wow. Yeah, this feels like one of the most impactful sort of big sets to come in and Impact Constructed. Like, I can't remember the last time this much felt like it was changing. I mean, Impact on Eternal format, Standard is turned completely upside down.
Well, we just had a year of Theros where the formats did not change as dramatically as anyone really would have wanted from Wizards to the players. I mean, this has been stated multiple times, and this is kind of the opposite of that. So it's a breath of fresh air for a lot of different reasons, and I'm really looking forward to playing with cons in all the formats. I mean, I think it's an awesome set, and it's fun to draft. I mean, so far it looks like a home run. I mean, ask me in a month, that's a good time to take stock again. But my initial impressions after playing for a couple weeks of Limited and Constructed are that cons is just like an A+.
Yeah, no, I again was talking to Eric today, and he asked me what I thought of the Limited environment, and I said, well, my range right now is somewhere between good and best ever. I haven't played it enough to figure out within that range, but like best ever is still in play. What am I, 4 or 5 minutes in at this point?
I mean, it's tricky because obviously your first impressions matter. I mean, if you don't have fun the first 3 times, that doesn't bode well. And I have had a lot of fun so far. You really have to test whether it's like a 10 draft format, a 20 draft format, or a 50 draft format. Those are like Innistrad, which was back online and is on back online for another day. I mean, that's a 100 draft format. I've done hundreds of drafts of Innistrad, and that's enough to completely pull me in. Whereas something like Theros, like I didn't draft Born of the Gods Theros after the Pro Tour, and the first 5 drafts were fun because it was new, but it did not captivate me the same way some of these other formats have. M15 actually was a good format, I think. I drafted it after the Pro Tour. I probably did 25, 30 drafts of M15. So there's this range, and I don't know where cons falls. I would be surprised if I did not do 50 drafts of cons. Like, I think it's a very good format. I think it'll keep me captivated.
Yeah, no, that sounds right to me too. I mean, at this point, there's so many things going on, and they all look cool. Like, I feel like you can draft 2-color, you can draft 5-color, you can draft the obvious 3-color guild or clan decks. It seems like so many different directions, and probably 20 different things before you've even tried them all.
Yeah, I mean, so far twice I've drafted green-white defensive that's splashing Villainous Wave, Nemesis Wave, Villainous Wealth as the finisher. I'm not saying that's an archetype, but I've just ended up there twice.
Oh, I lost a game to a Sultai deck yesterday that basically did nothing except stall the game, and all of a sudden it was Villainous Wealth, Icy Blast, kill you. Like,
yeah, that's pretty good. I also think that they should have called it Nemesis Wave. BDM, as far as I know, coined that term, and I think had this been discussed, I would be surprised if it did not get used. But obviously, we are where we are. It's just too good.
All right, so I know that we're getting the matches started. Glad you guys could hang out and chat with us. I'm trying to keep one eye on the chat, see if anybody has any specific questions. We'll be getting started with match 1. should be right around the top of the hour. Pakula and Rich Shea are up first. Do you think Chris gets fully punished here for not switching decks?
You know, Rich has got 4 Dak Faden in his deck, which that's not great for Chris. I mean,
no.
On the one hand, Dak Faden costs 3 mana of 2 different colors, and a lot of Chris's artifacts don't care which side they're on. You know, spheres and null rods and chalices. On the other hand, if you have a deck with lodestone golems that doesn't actually deal with creatures all that well, and one of your lodestone golems gets stolen, like Chris might actually be in a situation where he just doesn't slam lodestone golem until he's very sure he's going to be able to stop a Dak Faden from resolving.
Wow.
Rich also
he has to actually get to 3 mana, though. I mean, if Chris gets his good draw, Rich just crumbles and never casts anything.
I mean, that's clearly the challenge. Like, because stacks, you know, it could workshop can see. I'm bending to the popular will here. Because shops can stop you from ever being able to cast a card like that. But there are some, you know, the sloppy games that don't end up that way, and you actually have to grind through all their cards. Like Dak Faden's kind of unbeatable in those games, or at least very difficult to beat. So I think Chris is going to really want to not play a lodestone until he's pretty sure he's going to be able to cut Rich off of, you know, 3 mana or make 3 mana spells very difficult to cast. Past the Dak Faden, I mean, Rich also has Mirror Battle Sphere and Goblin Welder. If he can get one of Chris's Moxes into the graveyard somehow, then Goblin Welder, you know, is a very annoying card to deal with as well. And he's got
that's a good point.
4 Ingot Chewer, 2 Shattering Spree in the sideboard, as well as
Rich.
Yeah, 3 different basic lands in his deck.
Rich clearly expected Chris to, you know, gave Chris sort of a high percentage chance of just running back the Shop's deck that he 3-0'd with in the first set. I mean, Rich is definitely ready for this matchup.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, different decks are more vulnerable to metagaming. Like, Chris ran back 3-0'd with stacks pretty easily. You know, I mean, I think he got a little lucky against Dave specifically, but I think Chris's matches, his matches were pretty convincing. And running it back against, and now he's facing Steve, who had every card that said destroy target artifact on it that's legal in Vintage.
Pretty much.
He had Rich with 4 Dak Fadens and 2 Goblin Welders and 4 Ingot Chewers and 2 Shattering Sprees. Like, you're and you know, Ifra with Energy Flux and Back to Basics. Like, Stacks is a kind of deck that is vulnerable to that. Just make no mistake. If you know your opponent's playing Stacks, you can build an 80% matchup against them without a ton of difficulty. Whereas, like, I ran back a blue deck, you know, just kind of in the pantheon of, you know, generic blue type strategies. And I think everyone kind of knew that. And I don't feel like I've gotten overly punished, because even if people know I'm playing with, you know, Brainstorm, Ancestral, Mana Drains, Force of Wills, like, what exactly are they going to do? It's difficult to overly metagame against that.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. Just knowing that somebody's playing blue doesn't really tell you that much, really.
I mean, that's your main assumption in Vintage anyway, right? Don't you expect to play against that deck like 40% of your rounds or something? Like, some decent percentage. There's been, you know, some debate that the blue decks are actually not the best decks in Vintage, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I mean, I'm very much open to the suggestion that, like, a Workshop deck is the best call for a certain tournament, or even Dredge, but you can't say that the blue decks are easy to metagame out, because you can build decks that are, you know, slanted towards that, but you can't build a 90-10 matchup with basically anything. You'd have to do something very unrealistic to do that.
I agree. So you like Rich to beat Chris here because he's metagamed?
I think Rich has got an edge here. That said, with the fact that Rich is playing a 3-color deck that doesn't have a very low curve overall, he has, you know, the 4 Dak Fadens, multiple Notion Thieves, multiple Night's Whispers, which not a great card against a deck that's just trying to constrict your spells cast. And if Chris wins the die roll and just plays 2 spheres on turn 1, or plays a sphere and a chalice 0, like, I mean, Chris could just crush. Like, when stacks win, sometimes it just looks like it completely crushes.
All right. Sounds like we've got the game up and running. Yeah, we may as well head there. A couple minutes early, we won't miss much. Yeah, I mean, it's not like they've started playing.